Hi, so I'm Donovan Young. I do sound design and music for games and media, and some of you might know me as Mega Hammer Guy. Um, anyway, so today I'm going to give a little talk about designing games with audio in mind and sort of getting an early start on audio, thinking about it from the very inception, the concept phase of your design process. So I started out this presentation, developing this presentation based on a book I'm currently reading, which is called Leading with Sound by Rob Bridget, and that's hence the title, Guided by Sound. But the book's fantastic if you're an audio person. It's just a huge confirmation bias about why audio should be there at day one, and that's great. You just find yourself nodding in agreement the entire time. So I'm going to touch on a few of those concepts that make the book so compelling as an audio person, but then we're going to maybe bring it back down to earth a little bit. So yeah, include audio early. There's so many collaborative possibilities that you can find. There's so much potential. It can really guide you in a new direction, but that stuff isn't always practical, and it's much easier to say we'll have audio there on day one when there's hardly even anything to show in terms of a build. So in a perfect world, here are maybe some of the things that you could enjoy from having very early integration of the audio people into your team. So from a sound design perspective, you can garner a lot of inspiration. I'll play a little example here of an early sound I created for Kaiju Wars. One of the kaiju sounds like this. And I hope that went through, if I can get a thumbs up or something. So perhaps you would be inspired to go in a certain direction in terms of the size of the creature or the type of skin the creature has or something like that. Visual texture, styles, colors, these are all things that you can get inspiration from audio. So again, there's some hissing, there's some clicking, it's very insect-like. Oops, sorry. Cadence of the sound could also inspire a certain direction in terms of the size of the creature or how you're going to implement the sound. Is there going to be an attack and a sustain and a release? Is it going to be multi-part? Is it going to be maybe a little simpler? And the detail in the sound. Are we going for something minimalistic? Are we going for something that's going to have a lot of visual detail and size to it as well? So all possibilities here. And music, I'll play a little snippet and hopefully that's coming through. I'm just going to check to see if I'm getting any yes or no's from people. Okay, good. Okay, so Daniel says coming through. So there's a little piece of music I've been writing and developing for Chicken Journey. And the reason I showed, okay, I'm getting a thumbs up, great. The reason I'm showing it here is because music can inspire a lot of things even before there might be visuals. We can talk about the mood, and that might inspire a certain narrative direction. We could talk about the arrangement and what sort of dynamic or interactive possibilities we'll have. If this is a multi-layered, dense arrangement, maybe we can dole out these layers dynamically using some sort of vertical mixing system. That might have some implications on player choice or story or whatever. And then instrumentation or I guess timbre of the music as well. Do we want juxtaposition with the visuals? Do we want some type of contrast? Do we want that to shift over time? Do we want unity with the visuals? Does 8-bit music have to go with low-res pixel art, or do we want to try something, clashing or complementary? So other possibilities. Anyway, this is all under the ideal scenario where you can afford to or logistically allow for maybe the audio people to be there right at day one. But in reality, there are plenty of reasons why this might not be possible. And in reading this book, that's something that I found myself quite often coming to terms with, is that, if budget isn't an issue, if the work pipeline allows for it, if there's not going to be a ton of iteration, if schedules allow for it, then great, have everybody there at the table at the beginning. And as a designer, maybe you'll, open up new opportunities. But not always the case, right? And that's perfectly understandable. So in the real world, how can we still benefit from the things that this early adoption would bring without maybe going to the extent of hiring or involving audio that early on? So I think the solution I came to is that everyone can think like an audio lead. Everyone can think like a composer, like a sound designer, with a few different concepts. And by thinking like this, you might be able to alert yourself to these possibilities and leave space for or create avenues for them in the future. So design and plan with audio in mind. What would audio do? So let's talk about some categories that we could use to guide us. So this is also from this book that I mentioned in the beginning, which I've got on my desk somewhere here. Sorry, I'll grab that. There we go, Leading with Sound. So these three categories that Rob Bridget talks about are the world, the heart, and the mind, and then I have a plus there for transitional zones between the three of them. And this is not saying that every audio person is going to think in these terms, but I did find that they resonated a lot. And although they're very abstract and sort of creative things, they have very concrete technical implications as well. So it covers a very broad range of topics. So let's talk about them here. And by considering them, hopefully they can influence your game design decisions, which will facilitate the broader range of audio opportunities and possibilities when the time is appropriate. So let's talk about world first. The world category covers all of the objective audio. So diegetic game, world sounds, music, and VO. And I apologize if audio is a word that's making you think mostly sound design. I mean it as an umbrella term for music and voiceover as well. So all audio. So diegetic sounds that are emanating from the reality of the game world, sounds that aren't subjective or filtered through the minds of the player or through the NPCs or anything else. So I've got this really lame example. I don't know why I gravitated towards this one, but here we go. We're gonna think of this imaginary nightclub that for some reason exists in your game, and you as the player can enter into that nightclub, and there'll be other people there, and there'll be music. So the player enters this nightclub, hears and sees and interacts with the live band on the stage. So the music is being played and generated in real time by this band. The NPCs hear the same music that you hear. It's all happening in the same time, and the player is experiencing localized audio. So you can approach it, it gets louder, you can move away, it gets quieter. If you go outside of the club, it'll be filtered by the walls, it'll be quieter, you'll just hear the bass, and it'll interact with the environment. So the acoustics of the building will influence the way the music sounds. If it's a large building, it'll be echoey. If it's small, it might sound very dead and claustrophobic. So this would be an objective sound. Whether you are standing in the player's perspective or the NPC's perspective, you can all appreciate the same audio happening at the same time. And perhaps you could interact with it. You could go talk to the band members and they would stop playing, or tempo could increase if, I don't know, fight breaks out. I don't know. Not a nightclub guy, I guess. Maybe this is an old Western saloon. I don't know. Anyway, so that would be just one example of the world. Maybe I should go back to that for a second. So what implications might this have from a design perspective? Well, we would have to facilitate for a number of opportunities for the world to have influence on that sound. So you'll need to have 3D audio in this example, maybe, where you can, like I said, approach it, move away from it. So definitely we'll want 3D audio. We will want to work with layers of audio in case the band should, I don't know, a member stops playing or they change tempo or something like that. We want to have more granular control over the generation of the music. So, and I won't go off too much on a tangent about all the possible technical possibilities and ramifications of this stuff, because every game will be different. But basically, think about the world as a source of audio, objective audio. Okay, now the heart, the emotional audio. So this is audio that is, I guess you could say, filtered through or affected by the feelings and the internal life of the player. So there's many ways that this could affect music that maybe originated in the world and then gets filtered in some sort of way. For example, with the nightclub, the player enters the nightclub and has an audio experience defined by their feelings towards that nightclub. So maybe they step in and the band that might otherwise be objectively heard by this player because of their disposition hears it in slow motion like a dream sequence. And you can probably see how we can have transition between the two already. Maybe the singer in the band sounds better, or the band sounds better as a whole when the player goes and buys a drink at the bar. The audio might be localized, but it could also be distorted in a certain way. Again, with slow motion, maybe excess reverb for dramatic effect. Or it might transition into a disembodied score. So we're not talking about localized audio anymore. We're talking about just like stereo soundtrack audio. So just again, another example, I'm using music for the sake of consistency, but we could think about this as voiceover as well. You might have a character in, I don't know, let's say an office building or something. They're hyper-focused on their work and the world around them is a blur. So the audio is going to be muffled, filtered. People might not be clearly heard, even though the NPCs are saying, clearly recorded lines or something like that. So you're thinking of what is the headspace of the player? How's that going to affect audio, and what ramifications will that have from a design perspective? Or not just ramifications, but possibilities, right? So that's the heart. The mind, this one's a little harder to pin down, and I find there's a bit of overlap with the heart, but we're going to try to explore it anyway. Basically, this is audio that's affected by the controlled thoughts or generated by the controlled thoughts of the player. So it's almost like world audio, but it happens internally. It's supposed to be objective, but that's very, I guess, loose. But it's not a filtering in an emotional sense. Mainly vocal, so mainly VO is generated in this sort of way. The player might enter the nightclub and they'll be prompted to comment on the experience. So this might be like grunts or other small expressions of VO that the player would generate. They might complain in an inner monologue about the terrible music. They might be prompted to hum or sing when they approach the band or when they hear the music. So this is player-generated audio that the NPCs might not be able to hear, but it's still existing and it's being affected because of some sort of intellectual process. The NPCs might clap, snap, or applaud, so that would be world audio, but it would be world audio that's prompted by the thought process of the NPCs. So all different possibilities here. Again, it could be sound, it could be music, it could be VO, but we'll just try to keep it somewhat simple. So that's mind. A little hard to separate from heart, in my opinion, but it still merits its own category. And then transitional zones. So this would be when audio moves from one state to the other. So shifting between the world, heart and the mind for dramatic effect. The player might hear the band as they approach. The sound is first muted by the building, so they hear the filtered effect being outside the nightclub. So that's the world affecting the sound. And then they open the door, and dramatically they might hear crystal clear audio as they step inside. So that's all in the world zone. The same band that's producing the music might then transition into an emotional experience, the heart, as the player is swept up in maybe a memory, and we can have the dreamy, spacey sort of experience of that same audio. An important technical note is that this might not even mean recording different versions of the song. This could all be affected in game, and it could be very dynamic, right? It could be done with game engine or middleware, but in some sense, this would be affected by the engine in real time, so that we could have these unique experiences based on the player's choices. So they're swept up in emotion, and now we're hearing things through the heart. Then an NPC might shake the player out of their little daydream and elicit maybe a thought or a complaint from the player. So then this is their intellect responding and creating sound and responding to sound and affecting the way that the end player will eventually hear that sound. So back in reality, maybe the sort of dreamy atmosphere fades and the player shrugs it off and, I don't know, keeps a beat or starts singing or something like that. So all of these transitional opportunities, right? And underneath each one of these is a laundry list of technical implications, a list of certain demands that will be required on the audio person themselves for creating the music or creating the sound effects, rigging up all of these dynamic systems and all of these interactive possibilities. And maybe most importantly, there are a whole bunch of narrative opportunities here as well. So it's not just about the work the audio person has to do or just about the technical requirements the designer has to consider, but the storytelling implications. So we can now have this, just from this one little band playing in this club, we can have this really rich experience generated through these three different worlds and the transitions between them. So the implications I kind of just went over. Of course, it'll differ from game to game. Some games may not require half of this stuff. Other ones might require much more. So the idea is not to list the possibilities, but to inspire thought that'll bring you, to those possibilities for whatever your particular situation will be. So yeah, vast array of different experiences that should be considered as early as possible, just like anything else in the game, right? You want to open up these opportunities and not accidentally close doors early on because some opportunities were not considered. And it'll create some discussion of the role of audio in the bigger picture in the game. So it might make you question your sort of preconceptions of what audio should do in a game or could do in a game. And then it would be great if it could convince every game dev to hire an audio person from day one, but that's maybe not going to happen. So anyway, if you can't involve somebody early on to maybe help you explore these opportunities, I hope that at least keeping in mind the world, the heart, the mind, and the transitional states can inspire developers or writers or anyone else from any other discipline to consider the possibilities for audio and bring them to the table so that we can explore them when the time is right. And that's my thing. That's all I got. Thanks.